silent.
All right, Kyle, you may begin whenever you'd like.
All right, thank you, Jesus. And good evening to everybody, and welcome to the March 16th, 2022 meeting of the CB6 Executive Committee. My name is Kyle Athaide, and I am the chair of Manhattan Community Board 6. This meeting is being called to order at 6:33 p.m., and tonight we are joined by District Manager Jesus Perez. Tonight's minutes will be taken by the CB6 office. We will now take attendance by roll call. Jesus will conduct the roll call, so please answer present when your name is called.
All right, everyone. Kyle Athaide.
Present.
Thank you. Elvie Barroso.
Present.
Thank you. Matt Bondi. Matt Bondi. Claire Brennan.
Present.
Thank you. John Keller.
Present.
Thank you. Sandy McKee. Sandy McKee. All right. Rich Mintz.
Present.
Thank you. Kevin O'Keefe.
Present.
Thank you. Reshma Patel.
Present.
Thank you. Matt Roberts.
Present.
Thank you. Jean Santoro. I actually believe Jean cannot join us tonight. Is Phil Napolitano, the vice chair of the committee, here? Okay. Phil or Jean? All right, none of them. Okay, Sandro? Sandro Sherrod? Sandro Sherrod? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Mark Thompson?
Here.
Thank you. Brian Van Nieuwenhoven?
Present.
Thank you. Claude L. Winfield?
Present.
Thank you. We do have quorum. I should announce that we are also joined by B. Disman. We are having some technical difficulties with her. Oh, I think there we go. But per the bylaws, she's not technically a member of exec, but I just wanted to make her presence known to the committee.
Thank you, Jesus. And we have a quorum, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, I'm sorry if I didn't announce that we do have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, so the agenda for tonight's meeting will appear on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. So members of the executive committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom. Okay, seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the February 16th meeting were distributed to executive committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt these minutes as drafted. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand through Zoom. Yes, Elvie, are you objecting?
Yeah, I think it was stated that we didn't have a meeting last March 10th, but we did hold the meeting.
At the time of exec, it was announced that health would not be having a meeting. That changed, that that change was made after the fact of exec. So the minutes do have to reflect what happened at the meeting. I mean, maybe we can put some sort of asterisk or something. I don't know. That may be a little unorthodox, but at the time of exec, that was the position of the committee, that they would not be having a meeting. The change came the day after.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, seeing no further objections, the minutes from the February 16th meeting are adopted. So let's set some ground rules as we begin to get into committee work. In order to conduct an efficient meeting tonight, let's observe a few ground rules. First, no one may speak until granted the floor by me. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please first raise your hand through Zoom. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. Any and all such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information, such as an email address or link, that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will first identify you, and then you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. And last but not least, we are required by New York State law to have a transcript of this meeting. So please keep all questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. I'll now begin by delivering my chair's report. And as I mentioned at last week's meeting, I would like to devote this time to the discussion of the open meetings law and how we want to proceed as a board going forward. I asked the board office to distribute the borough president's letter of guidance that was submitted actually to us right before our full board meeting. So I had not fully read it at that time, but I hope that everybody had a chance to read it. But if not, Jesus, can we just pull it up on our screen so that everyone can work from the same starting point?
Sure. Second.
Thank you.
My apologies. I could have sworn I had it just 5 minutes ago. Here it is.
No worries. Thank you. All right, there we go. All right, so if we can go down to the bullet points. So as everybody knows, technically the virtual option for public bodies to meet expired on the 15th, which was yesterday. There's a lot of confusion going around, especially that since right before this meeting, the governor announced that there was an extension of the state of emergency. We're not exactly sure if that specifically applies to open meetings law. We need to do a little bit of research on that. But regardless, the extension of the state of emergency is to April 15th, and we still should take a position on this for ourselves and for our board as we proceed, because we're just going to be in the exact same position next month. So I want to go through what the borough president and his general counsel, of course, put together for us, because this can help us in our discussion tonight. So as we can see on the screen, the first and foremost thing is that community boards cannot require board members or members of the public to be vaccinated or masked when meeting in person. We are permitted to schedule public meetings at venues that institute their own on-premises vaccination or mask requirement. Although if reasonably possible, boards should seek venues without such requirements. In the event that a board cannot avoid scheduling a meeting, whether a general meeting or committee in a location with a vaccination screen or mask requirement, the board may do so. However, the board may not be the enforcing body of the venue's vaccination or mask policy. Next, the boards are allowed to set up ways for members of the public to participate in meetings virtually, but there must also be an opportunity for the public to attend and comment in person if they wish. Next, community boards are allowed to institute public health guidelines that are consistent with the CDC, Board of Health, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, and the New York State Department of Health. If such guidelines are adopted, including social distancing, the community board should consider whether the venue is large enough to hold the anticipated audience. If us, the community board, believes that the space is not large enough, it should consider whether an overflow room is available. So these were the guidances that we received for the Manhattan Borough President. This was something obviously we had been talking about during Borough Board and ever since he came into office, because many community boards are dealing with this issue. But as you can see from these guidelines, they're not very helpful, the state of affairs as they are, because people are still dealing with fear of the virus. As we're seeing, some of the rates are actually increasing now that a lot of the public health guidelines have been legally removed. So there is still a sense of fear about amongst board membership and the public about convening in such large quantities in public spaces. The second issue, of course, is that most of the venues that we have convened in before are hospitals or academic institutions, which still have pretty strict guidelines for the safety, of course, of their patients and their staffs and their students, and is not readily available to us as a community board, where not only would we have at least 50 people, but an unknown amount of public members who are attending as well. So this is where we are with this current situation. Hopefully people have been able to think about it a little bit, but I want to, before going into the options that we have, and I'll sort of map that out for us, I want to go to the data that our board accumulated through the survey that we had sent out, because I think that will provide some pretty good context for the rest of the discussion as well. And as a reminder, this is a survey amongst board members coming together. And Jesus, do you actually want to walk us through this since you did it during full board as well?
Sure. And just to update a little bit of what Kyle said before, the extension of the open meetings law that just came down not even 2 hours ago, that does extend our ability to meet on Zoom. So today would have been the last meeting that we could officially meet on Zoom. Now, thanks to the just hot off the presses executive order extension of executive order 11.4, that extends us to April 15th. So any meeting that we have on April 15th or before can still be on Zoom. At that time, we will have to wait to see if the governor extends it again or if she lets it lapse. If you go and you see if you go and read the executive orders 11, 11.2, 0.3, 0.4 yourself, you will notice it does not say anything about the open meetings law in those. The reason it doesn't is because a law was passed that said that the open meetings law, at least the in-person meeting portion, was suspended, predicated on the executive order 11 and any of the extensions. So it's sort of, there's a law that refers to the executive orders. So if you go and read them, the executive orders, that's why you will not see open meetings law mentions in those executive orders. It was a little bit confusing at first, but that's why. All right. To walk people through the meeting preferences survey that we sent. We reached out and most of the board members replied. And in the end, it shook out like this. If it were up to us, and it was clear in the survey, it is not up to us, but if it were, 52% of the board, 24 members, said that they wanted to stay on Zoom. Now, you'll notice these numbers are not based on 50 members. Keep in mind that currently we have 2 vacant seats, and there were 2 additional members who did not submit responses to this survey, but they will not be with us much longer. And so I corrected for that. And then everyone else is there. There may be 1 or 2 members who did respond who may not continue on the board, but that is not for me to say. And given that they did submit responses, those responses are reflected in here. So of those that we've got, 52% of members said that they wanted to stay on Zoom forever if it were their choice. 28%, 13 members, said that they don't really care either way. And 13%, 6 members, said that they would actually prefer to meet in person and more or less be done with Zoom. So when you take into account those that said they would prefer to meet on Zoom forever and those that don't really care either way, you've got 80% of the board who would be okay if we met on Zoom forever. You know, if it were up to us, that would certainly seem to be overwhelming, an overwhelming majority, but it's not up to us. Going on to safety precautions, this I'll have to let you know that at the time we had not received the guidance from the Borough President's office, so this is a little bit out of date now, but there were 22% of members, 10 in total, who said that they were not comfortable attending meetings at this time. 13% of members, 6 total, said that they were comfortable attending meetings even if there wasn't any masking, any vaccine requirements, any social distancing, just the old way, they're fine doing it now. 59% said that they are comfortable attending meetings so long as there's some sort of combination of safety precautions. Social distancing was not a super popular one. It was mostly masking and vaccination. But as Kyle mentioned in his report, this is not possible. So we did not know that at the time. If we did, we would have restructured these questions. But it does seem like the majority of people who said that they would come to meetings did so only under the assumption that there would be meaningful safety precautions in place. And right now, it doesn't look like there will be. So unless there are questions, I'll hand it back to Kyle.
Thank you. Yeah, so before we go into the conversation about how we want to proceed, are there any questions about the data that we accumulated or the Borough President's letter itself? Okay, seeing none. So let's, do you have the slides I sent you, Jesus, of the options?
I do.
Awesome. All right. So there are basically 3 options in the way that we can move forward. For each of them, I've listed the drawbacks to them. I think at this point, we really know what the positives and the negatives are of each. And so the way these are written are basically in terms of implementation, how this would actually work for our board, and what the drawbacks are for each of these. So the first option that we have is to return in person. So this is pre-pandemic style, meeting in spaces and not having social distancing or any of the vaccine requirements or masking because we don't have the enforcement ability to do so. So these are some of the other issues that we're going to deal with if we return in person. So the first one is securing venue space will be very, very difficult. Again, most of the public space that we utilize are in hospitals and / medical schools. This means that the only way to meet in person for any meetings, as outside of committee meetings, which currently our board office can handle, but for particularly controversial topics, it's uncertain that our board office would be able to handle the volume of people. So really going forward, if we need to secure venue space, the only way would be to rent space out. This may not be sustainable for a long period of time. This is definitely sustainable for the rest of this year. But thinking about how we want to move forward in general as a practice, this may not be sustainable to devote basically rent for each month for a space. Again, as a reminder, we're not allowed to require any public health safety measures, but the venue itself may be able to do so. But what we're seeing so far is that the safety measures that venues are taking is to not allow big groups of people into their spaces. Another issue, which goes into the practicality, is that we can no longer record meetings in good quality. So the way that we have our Zooms recorded, how the Zooms really sort of substitute for transcripts and minutes and things like that. The fact that they're stored on YouTube for posterity, so people can go back and review meetings that they might have missed or not attended or are not on the committees themselves. We will no longer be able to do that. So we will need to return to traditional minute taking and deal with all of the things that we did before. Based on the data that we saw, there is a very serious risk that we may not make quorum for these meetings, given people's priority of public health and safety and personal medical issues and things that are coming up in their lives. Already heard from several board members that they may leave the board because it would no longer be sustainable commitment, given that the pandemic has brought new challenges into people's lives, that the flexibility of not being in person allowed for greater impact. This is same for the public. We may have less public engagement. We saw in the survey that we took last year, the data of which was actually part of our initial letter to the governor and state legislature to provide a virtual option, showed that many people in the public were actually able to attend community board meetings for the first time in their lives because there was a virtual option, that they were able to participate and understand what was going on. And we saw a lot of great work come out of our committees that were actually spurred on by public activism and engagement. So that may decrease as well if we require people to actually show up to meetings in person on weekday evenings. And then, of course, with that comes less transparency. So if we are limiting it to the amount of people who can show up to a weeknight meeting in person at a certain location, that of course does not allow for the greatest transparency with the rest of the community, especially since the meetings won't be recorded for everybody to see. So that's option one. We can go to option two. So option two is virtual. We remain virtual. The big and foremost one is that resolutions may be invalidated if challenged. That's the whole issue in dealing with virtual meetings outside of these extensions, that it is not technically considered a meeting if we're holding it virtually. So my thinking is if we continue with this option, we would need to require in-person attendance for full board, for business affairs and licensing and land use and waterfront, because those are particularly important review processes that we have within those committees that then need to be verified through full board as well. We can think about how that works again itself, but that is the number one option. So if that's something that we are not afraid of risking, because it does depend on, if someone challenges it, and says it wasn't accessible, that is the possible repercussion. We may have an argument against it because when the open meetings law was first written, it did not account as virtual space as a public space, which, as we have seen, has been utilized in that way. And then the second feedback that I hear from board membership and from the public is that the virtual option, of course, does not allow us to socialize or connect in person. Which is, to different people, a priority or not a priority in their commitment to the board, to their board work. But it is something lost, right? The fact that we have these connections with each other, that ideas are spurred on by just being in a physical presence to each other, that is something lost through the virtual option. And then let's go to the last one. So last option is hybrid. Now, hybrid in theory sounds really, really great because it seems to be the best of both worlds, but in fact, it is not. It is first and foremost a logistical nightmare because of all of the things that need to happen in order for a hybrid meeting to take place properly. Members would still have to appear in person to be counted as present. So it doesn't really change anything. And it gives us the same issue as option one. We still need to secure a venue space to do so. AV will be an sort of properly done in a hybrid mode. We don't have professional recording equipment. The venue spaces we may be able to utilize may not be set up for such good recordings. It'll be difficult for people to converse across platforms. So if there's someone who's virtually debating somebody who's in person, that may create a lot of issues. It may not run properly, and can just and then having that all recorded may not be possible either. So again, we're basically in the same issues as option one. And then secondly, if hybrid is an option, everyone may choose to attend virtually anyway. So it's no longer hybrid, it then becomes option two. So these are some of the challenges that we have heard feedback from others who've implemented these type of things, and from board membership and from the public itself. But I really think as an executive committee, we need to have a conversation on this and actually come to a collective decision that we want to share with the rest of the board, because we do need to sort of have a stance on this one way or the other, because we're going to be in the exact same position next month. And we can't just sort of keep going month by month, hoping that it gets extended. We really need to have a plan in place. So is there the fourth slide, just highlighting all of them? All right, so these are the three options. And now I just want to open it up for conversation, feedback, ideas, tweakings, questions that, points of clarification with the board. Could we actually keep that slide up, Jesus?
Sure.
The one, just so people are reminded. Thank you. All right, so hands up. All right, I see John's hand up. John, go ahead. You're on mute. Sorry.
But I think Reshma beat behind nanosecond there, so I'll defer to her.
Okay, Reshma, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, John. I wanted to know, do we know, I know you only got it 2 hours ago. Do we know why they only extended to April 15th and what led to that?
No.
We didn't get an explanation.
Yeah.
The governor has decided to just go, month by month and essentially extend it for as little as possible. At the very height of the pandemic, obviously the executive orders covered much larger periods. Now that it does seem like people are emerging out of the pandemic, the governor does not want to overshoot. I happened to be at a holiday party before Omicron, and I happened to just run into a state legislator and talk to this person a little bit about this off the record. And they confirmed that, for example, in our resolution, I was telling this person about our resolution that asked for a 1-year extension of this ability to meet on Zoom. And they said that that was a very unlikely scenario, because at this point, the thinking is to go just as little as possible for what is absolutely necessary. And that's most likely why we've been getting it in dribs and drabs like this.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And the other thing, this is very comprehensive, and thank you for putting this together. I have done hybrid events.
Reshma, it looks like your microphone went off.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, I have done hybrid events. I apologize for the noise. I've done hybrid events, and all the problems you brought up happen, and a lot of times you could have a technical issue, and then only the in-person people will be able to participate. And I think that's also worth noting.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, yeah, that's one of the things that is concerning to us as well. We have obviously experimented with this in the past, last year when things were working, and we, ran into some of these troubles as well, where people were not picked up on the mic. And listen, as we all know, when people are in person, people aren't necessarily thinking about how this gets captured on video or audio, and people speak over each other, and people speak without being recognized. And that's part of, people being in person. But in a hybrid mode, we also have to wonder how that translates to people who are virtual. And does one platform get preferred over the other? If people are meeting in person and debating, are people who are participating virtually essentially shut out because they can't get a word in because they're physically not there? So these are all things we were taking into consideration as too. But again, this is why I would like for us to discuss and actually take a vote on an approach going forward as an executive committee. Because essentially what's happening at the state level is that it keeps getting, the can keeps getting kicked down the road. And we keep our, getting into this position of being in limbo where we're like, okay, well, are they not? And it actually puts a lot of stress on our board staff who have to figure out like, okay, well, now we do have to meet in person and we just found out this day that it's not being renewed and we have a week to secure physical space for a meeting. And that's what happened, the first time it happened, we had a weekend to secure space for a committee meeting. That was a very big committee meeting and we weren't able to do so because it was still a pandemic. So it is not very helpful from the state side. We would hope that they think about this more comprehensively and come up with an option. And I think an option means that community boards can decide for themselves what's best for their constituencies and their board membership. Our board membership has obviously overwhelmingly said that they would like to go in one way, which I think needs to be respected and put into this conversation. Other boards may feel differently and they should have their right to run it themselves. But to prohibit an option doesn't really make sense. And so I think what else would come out of tonight's meeting would be another public letter urging our electeds and the borough president and Senator Hoylman, whose bill that we actually supported in the resolution through your committee, Reshma, put out an op-ed as well, advocating for this as well. So this would be something where we can, we were the first actual public body in the state back in 2021 when the restrictions were lifted to push back against this. And we got every Manhattan Community Board except one onto this. And of course, a couple of weeks after, a public meeting for a community board ended up getting spreading COVID, which was not a fun thing. And fortunately, everyone made it through. But I think as outside of the public health guidelines, which we are still in, we have not gotten out of it yet, is the fact that life has changed and how we operate has changed, and laws and flexibilities need to be reflective of that. But that's why I think we need to take a stand on this and move forward with it in unison. But John, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, just a comment, general comment that it's just my own, and that is I'm still reading a lot of things in the news about what's happening in other countries, and we're by no means in a certain state of where this is, in terms of being over. And there was I'm not promoting one person's views, but Dr. Gupta, I think, had a very good op-ed piece in CNN earlier this week about looking at his patient and saying my patient is still sick, but that's everybody could have a different view on that. So what I'd like to propose is that we might be able to find a way to have our cake and eat it too here a little bit, which I usually don't like to do. And that is, yes, I think we should stay virtual for the rest of this term, whatever you describe it, until June. Typically, the full board does not meet in July and August, and that we just say we're going to stay virtual. And if the committees, if Claire's committee and Anton's committee, and I guess one other committee, has to meet in person, then we will do that. But even if people aren't comfortable meeting in person, we're only talking a couple of meetings in a couple of months. And in terms of, as I understand the bylaws, and Beatrice is here to correct me, we could all probably afford to miss, people could all probably afford to miss one or two meetings and not put their standing in the board in jeopardy by doing that if they felt uncomfortable with meeting in person. So I would recommend we stay virtual through the end of this year through June. The board does not meet in July and August typically. And that this be revisited by exec over the summer as to what we're going to do in September. So that's how I would approach it, but would feel strongly about continuing virtual through the end of this fiscal year, however one wants to describe it.
All right, thank you, John. We'll next move on to Kevin.
Yeah, I would support John's recommendation. And maybe I missed something, but in the hybrid model, why do board members need to be in person to be counted present?
Because the law would revert back to the way it was pre-pandemic, and there is no allowance in the law for allowing board members to take advantage of the hybrid option. You know, the hybrid option that everyone would be, as Kyle mentioned, the best of both worlds, if it could be assured technologically, but also the board members cannot use it. It's only for the public, and it's only for guests like presenters and stuff. Until the law is changed, and there is legislation circulating, but it's still it's still in committee and at the legislature. Until that law is changed, if we can assure a hybrid option, let's say we're able to do that, the board members must still be in person, or they must be counted absent, and they would not be allowed to vote.
Yeah, just to echo that, in a way, it's like the hybrid is a red herring in that it can only be utilized by, so the reason why it's a hybrid is a red herring is because hybrid isn't technically hybrid. It ends up being one of the first two options. It ends up being either returning in person or it ends up being virtual, because only members of the public can utilize that, or presenters. So you're essentially returning in person because board members have to be there in person to make the quorum and all of that. And as the guidance said from the borough president, we are allowed to have people join virtually, but the board members ourselves, for the meeting to actually be official, we have to have a quorum in person. So it ends up being a in-person option anyway. The second thing is, if it ends up, a change ends up happening where it can be hybrid, where board members can, opt to attend virtually or in person, you could then revert to option 2, which is all the board members end up saying, I want to just, attend virtually because I can. And so you're in the exact same place, or maybe you're in an empty room and the board staff is in an empty room with the committee chair or me as the chair, and everyone else is virtual, right? So we end up possibly going to one of the first two options anyway. So it's, again, one of those things in theory that sounds really good, but in practice and from what we've seen and the feedback we've heard, seems to be more misleading actually than anything else.
And let me clarify something I said. There is one option for hybrid for members, but let's say you want to Zoom from home. We would need to list your home as a public meeting spot. So that would go back into the law. That's the way it was before the pandemic, and when the law reverts back, that will still be there. And given that no one really wants to do that, that's not really an option. It's really made for, like, let's say there's an official in Albany and they're in a public meeting room and they want to Zoom they want to teleconference in from there, and they can allow people to come and meet, view there. That's typically what that's for. It's not for, member A is going to open up their apartment so that folks can come in and watch them Zoom. But effectively, that's what we would have to do. And that's not an appealing option to anyone for both health and safety reasons, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Rich, your hand was just up and then it went down.
I took it down because my question was answered.
Okay, perfect. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question. Has the BP rule, I mean, it's only been 2.5 hours now, but has the BP said anything about this?
So the only thing that the BP has said has actually been about tomorrow's borough board meeting, which was originally scheduled to be in person. Because the expiration went out. But as soon as the state of emergency was issued, they have now turned it into a hybrid meeting. So board chairs can choose to attend in person or virtually. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening with that. I will probably attend virtually because it is most convenient to do so.
Yeah. Will you be able to raise this, like our discussion tomorrow at Borough Board?
Yeah, so that's
Since we tend to lead the way.
Yeah, so we've actually amongst ourselves have already been talking about this, the chairs. And it was in relation to the bills that have been out. So there's a bill obviously out by Senator Hoylman, who's actually been a really great partner with our board on this and has been really happy with the work that we've been doing because it supports his work. And Assembly Member New as well from downtown, who also has a bill in the Assembly. Both of these bills are requesting a virtual option be allowed so that if we choose to continue to meet virtually, it's not in violation of anything. If people choose to meet in person, that's fine as well. But it gives us the flexibility of figuring out for ourselves how we want to run these meetings. So that's where we are with that. The BP hasn't really said anything. I'm assuming we'll hear more tomorrow about what they are thinking and maybe some new guidances that they'll be able to share with us. But yeah, that's where we are with that.
I think if we're taking a vote tonight, that our vote will possibly influence what the borough president does or says.
I mean, I hope so. I mean, I hope that we can take the lead on this and really, because we've been very, very thoughtful about this. Every time another community board chair is talking about this, they refer to how we have been accumulating data on this, that we've been surveying the public, surveying the board members for quite some time now, and are getting real responses back about how this would practically work. And so they've modeled very similar things in their own boards after us. And so like what I would like to do is like have some sort of statement and then again partner up with those who are taking the lead on this, because again, this wasn't a split vote on meeting virtually or in person. Essentially 80% of the board said like, yeah, we can continue to work virtually. And there were only a handful of people who said that they wanted to meet in person. So that says a lot. I think this is one of those things where it's about, adapting to new sort of changes in our lives and how we operate and how we work, and combating that against the way things have always been and sort of having that mentality. And I think that's really where a lot of the debate comes from, because our work has still been efficient. We've still been, we've increased transparency, we've increased engagement. And so there needs to be flexibility around that. At the very least, and boards need to be able to choose for themselves how they proceed. So yeah, that's my hope, is that if we take a vote as an executive committee, we've already written resolutions through our budget and governmental affairs, and that have been ratified by the full board as well, that we are in support of the legislation for virtual options. We obviously asked for a larger extension than I guess is politically being done. But I think if we have that in addition to an executive committee discussion and are really, steadfast in how we want to proceed, that helps us in further advocating this, getting other boards on board with this, and working with the elected officials who are taking the lead on this. Yeah. Alvi?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Can the hybrid be on alternate months, like every other month?
So the issue with hybrid isn't necessarily the scheduling of it, but just the practicality of it at all at any point, whether it would be every other month or once a year even. It's just that it doesn't allow for what we think it allows, is the issue, which is why I wanted to spell it out, because hybrid in theory sounds great. It's like, oh, like if you want to, come from home, you can do it from home. If you want to be in person, it works. But again, the technological things that we have don't really allow for things to be properly recorded. We tried it with one of our committee meetings, and we were able to, exist and get through it. But It was not, one of the best recordings, and sort of didn't really address the issue because people were still meeting in person. So it wasn't truly hybrid. So that's the issue. But I think, you're getting to a point, which is also like, if we choose to go this route, this is something that kind of connects to another topic that I've, spoken with each of you as chairs, which is, thinking very thoughtfully about how you want your agenda to look like, what you want to utilize your meetings for, right? So if you don't, have really, a meaningful agenda that's coming up, or any time sensitive issues, you can choose to cancel them, right? You can choose to hold meetings every other month if you feel that's more beneficial to how you want to run meetings. But that is sort of a separate topic than this, but it does hit on that point of like, how are we thinking about the way we're putting meetings together? How, what is the content of those meetings? And again, that's why, we had sent each of you a list of all of your agendas for the last year, with really thoughtful notes that the board staff put together, that I shared with the board staff as well, for your review, because we want to make sure that these meetings are productive and meaningful. And if we're kind of in a situation where like, oh, like, let's just get something on the agenda because we're meeting next month, this also allows us to kind of reevaluate that and think about, okay, do we need a meeting each month? Should we just do it every other month? Should we do it virtually? If it's in person, say we decide to return in person, do we need a meeting each month? Should it be every other month? So these are part of the equation as well, when we're thinking about these options, but is sort of a separate topic than what we're discussing right now. But thank you for that.
And again, as a reminder, LV, the hybrid option would be for presenters and for the public. Members would still legally have to be in person in order to be counted as present, or they would have to let the public into their home so that they could view while they're Zooming from home. So, which effectively is not an option. And Kyle alluded to this. Yes, I get the issue he raised about being more thoughtful about whether a meeting is required every single month is a separate topic. And I hope exec takes that up, because as the office, we see a lot of the back end of these meetings, and we would have thoughts to contribute. But to get back to this particular topic, a hybrid meeting would, look, we've tested hybrid in the office. The first time we've done it, we only had a laptop to do it with, and it was simply one computer running on Zoom, and everyone, there was people in person and then people watching at home. Since then, we have gotten a kind of camera that is a little bit more advanced, but it is not meant for the diffusion of large meetings with lots of people in the public and people at home. That's not what it's meant for. Effectively, it's meant for hybrid staff meetings, for example, where everyone is around a conference table and then there are people on Zoom at home. Our meetings are bigger than that, and they've got more moving parts than that. We could probably do a relatively successful hybrid meeting in the office, but that means no social distancing. I mean, it would be, because we can't there. If we'd social distance people in the office, there'd be 3 people there. And 2, it would require a lot more rigidity, I think, than members are used to displaying in their meetings. There cannot be crosstalk. There cannot be mumbling, in the back, in the seats. There cannot be offside conversations. If anybody wants to be recognized, they must raise their hand. They must then stand up and go to the front of the room where they're near the camera and the microphone, and it's got to be a lot more formal. And pre-pandemic, that wasn't always, very amenable. A lot of members weren't really amenable to that. And so that's going to take some getting used to. And if there's no buy-in from the members, it may not be worth, all the effort to try and make it work.
Yes, thank you. Are there any other thoughts on this? Any questions?
I will say that whatever course of action the executive committee decides to vote on tonight, Kyle touched upon it earlier in his remarks, advocacy has to be a part of that, because I feel like at times, and we do this with many resolutions, but we'll sort of put out a resolution, and sometimes it's a really good one, and we'll try and get it out there, but then we sort of wait for someone to take it up and act on it. This particular thing, which is very important and in a way matters to us more than some other things, and maybe the difference between some members staying on and some members leaving, it feels like we should push on this a little bit more and advocate for it a little bit more actively than we might otherwise do for other things. Thank you.
Yes. No, thank you for saying that, Jesus. Yeah, and that's why I need to be empowered by the executive committee to move forward on this as well. This is very similar to the situation when this was first brought down about a year ago, when overnight we had like 2 days to go back to in person, and so I need a vote to be able to put together a letter that reflects everything that we've discussed, all of the resolutions that we've put out, and really start pushing with our electeds and creating those partnerships in a more public way. Reshma?
I think we should push to be able to have a Zoom or any type of virtual option at any time, because just last Saturday I had a meeting that got switched to virtual because the weather was really bad. And so if there's a big snowstorm or something, we will always be able to have this option. And
exactly.
Yeah, and so I think we should push for that. And I also think that, today we saw the US Congress had a virtual meeting with someone who was in a bunker in Ukraine, right? And I don't want to be a doomsday person, but who knows what can happen.
No, exactly. Listen, and it's about an option. And I think sometimes when people hear this conversation, they think it's one or the other. That it's like, okay, we're completely changing the law and, prohibiting people from meeting in person. Now, this is about making sure that there's an option. Now, each community board can work in their own way. Like, we put out a survey and 80% of people said that they're totally fine with working virtually. It very easily could have gone the other way. And 80% of people could have said, you know what, I want to meet in person. And how boards choose to do that is up to them. But we need to be able to have that option because it doesn't prevent transparency. It doesn't prevent public engagement. It actually heightens the purpose of the open meetings law. And that's what we stated in a letter last year, is that it doesn't do any of those things. It actually makes it more open, our meetings, because they are recorded in full, because people can join from anywhere. And I think it also needs to be reflective of the world that we're in. People have different priorities and commitments and don't necessarily have the chance to go to a full board meeting for about 3 hours on a Wednesday night anymore. It's just a different reality and we need to adapt. So that's one of the reasons why, just to provide my opinion, I don't think there should be a time limit on the voter request that we take, that it should be, we think this should be an option, and this is the option we're going to utilize forward. And of course, within our own community board, we are a thoughtful leadership team here that we will continually be checking in with with our membership to see how things are going. And if we choose to at some other point to say, hey, you know what, everyone wants to meet in person, that's a conversation to have at that time. But the conversation right now is people want to meet virtually because it allows them the flexibility and ability to participate while living their professional and personal lives in addition to this. And so, again, it was an overwhelming thing. And when you see something like that, I believe in my position as chair, we have to fight for the democratic process because we are a democratic body. And that's what a overwhelming majority said. And so we need to reflect that as well and push for that. Are there any other thoughts on this?
Bundle.
I'll say, operationally, Zoom has been very useful. I know it has left some things on the table, like the social aspect, but the interpersonal aspect, I'll say rather. But community boards do not have their own auditorium spaces that are dedicated. We pretty much have to go cap in hand to institutions and ask them, please, can we meet? Please, can we do this? And oftentimes we get what we get. Beggars can't be choosers. So sometimes the mics won't work, and sometimes the door gets locked, and sometimes any number of things I've seen any number of things happen. I think this, ultimately in the future, if a real push for in-person materializes, what I also hope materializes is a real push to the city to really invest in community boards and give them the resources, the facilities that they need. Because if community boards are important enough to force them to have in-person meetings in the middle of a pandemic, they're important enough to fund them adequately. I remember a particular meeting. It was a land use meeting. It was held in one of our usual spots where we hold meetings, and there were people that would come from the public, and they would sit in the back, and they could not hear because the microphones weren't working that day. And there was a person who left the meeting room grumbling how unprofessional and amateurish the meeting was because of something like that. And I felt very bad because I agreed with her. And but some of those things were just out of my control because I don't control the meeting space. So if in fact in-person meetings are going to be a thing again, then community boards need to step up and en masse advocate for this. There is a budget request that we have on this topic asking for a municipal facility, but it sort of had to be watered down because there was resistance even within members on this board. It cannot be, maybe it's because it's only the office that has to deal with that, but the board has to value itself enough to advocate for these things if in fact that's the way it's going to go eventually. Virtual Zoom seems to solve that problem. We always have a 300-person venue. We always have microphones. We always have telecasting. All these things are just there. They're built in. Is it perfect? No, but it is immensely, immensely superior to what we had before. So, sorry, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. That's valuable to hear on the operational side. Before we conclude this discussion, I see that we have a couple of attendees. We're here, and I just want to, give you the opportunity to add anything to this conversation for those who are not on the executive committee. So if anybody has anything to say or add or question, please feel free to participate in that. Okay. I'm not seeing any question from our attendees. So what I would like for us to do is to take a vote on this. Just from the conversation, it seems like virtual is the way that we want to go. So let's just say this. So what we have before us is that we as the executive committee are choosing to continue to operate meetings virtually in order to respect public health of our board members and the public, as well as the practicalities of this new world that we're in, and all of the advantages that virtual provides over meeting in person. And of course, the overwhelming desire by the board, which was expressed through the survey, to continue to meet virtually. So if anybody has any objections to us proceeding in that way going forward, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up to object, so that is a unanimous decision by the executive committee to continue virtual meetings going forward. All right, so I just want to thank everybody for that conversation. It's obviously very intense, it's very complicated, but I appreciate all of your thoughtfulness and engagement in this matter. And as always, we will always be checking the temperature to check in and see how it's working for people. And Of course, this can be a conversation that comes up at a later time to see how we want to modify or change our approach going forward. But for now, and definitely, we are continuing to work virtually. All right. The second thing that I have, just as part of my report, is just a quick reminder. As many people remember, when I first became chair, I asked everybody to put together a work plan for their calendar year for their committees. We want these meetings to be substantive, to be meaningful, and for there to be a thread between all of the meetings. So as I reminded you, not every meeting needs to result in a resolution. You do not need to meet every month if you don't feel like you have anything substantive or timely to discuss. But there should be a thread. You could spend all of your meetings to result in one resolution by the end of the year if each meeting is devoted to hearing different perspectives and including public engagement and different voices. The work plan, I was really happy to see people put that together their first year, and I think that helped sort of guide people as they were going forward and help people focus. And so for this year, what we're doing is we already sent out all of your agendas for the last year, and we've added notes to it and thoughts and sort of follow-ups about things that we discussed at the beginning of this year. And so I want everybody to take a look at that. If you've already taken a look at it, please take a look at it again, because every committee has something they can improve on. So nobody should be replying to that saying it looks good, it's fine, there's nothing to be changed, because now we're entering another year. And I want to make sure that we are utilizing people's time really well, that we are following up on the things that we've been pushing for, and really getting things done rather than just talking about them each single meeting and each single year. So please take a look at that and add your notes, and we will try to schedule meetings with each of you to discuss that as we prepare for the new year, because we want to make sure that our meeting time is really valuable and meaningful, and that it is productive. So please take a look at that. Add your own comments to it if you have points of clarification, if you need help with things. If you feel a little bit lost or unprepared or unsupported, please reply to those emails to us so that we can prepare for the next year. There's a lot of things on each of your committee's plates, lots of relevant and timely topics, and we should be getting involved in that. So please take a look at those and respond back with your own commentary and a time for us to speak. And with that, I'll conclude my report and turn it over to Jesus if you have anything additional for a district manager's report.
No, I think you covered the gray matter that was going to be the subject of my report. So I think that I can waive my report, but I do have just one follow-up question. Just because I am writing the minutes, the unanimous vote by the executive committee was to empower you to advocate for virtual meetings, or was it to say that the board was going to stay with virtual meetings regardless of what happens 1 month from now? For example, if after the 15th of April, the executive order is not continued, and then we really do have to go back to in-person meetings.
Correct. It was the latter. So it was that we will continue to meet virtually indefinitely.
Even full board?
Even full board, regardless of what happens with the open meetings law. And that decision will help empower me to be able to speak on behalf of the board, because we have validated that through exec. Was that unclear to anybody else on executive committee? If so, please let me know now if that was a distinction for anyone else. Sandy, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that. I thought John had mentioned that we proceed until the summer and then maybe do a reevaluation. I think that might be a really good strategy to take. And, things are changing constantly. So there may be an excellent hybrid option by then. Maybe not, but we don't know. Okay. So I'd like to just say that it's not indefinite, that we certainly empower you to go in and advocate for us, but that we should review it in the summer.
Okay. Matt?
Yeah. I kind of agree with the sunset on that. I mean, I think, the summer is probably a good time to review it, but I mean, indefinitely would kind of leave us open to litigation, in my view.
Okay. And Rich?
I just want to note that if a good hybrid option does come about, it will probably be because this community board develops it, because it's a complicated logistical problem, and we are probably up toward the front of community boards in terms of our understanding of the technological options. So I wouldn't be too optimistic that the logistical problems of meeting hybridly will be solved by anyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Rich. And Sandy, is that still your first hand up, or you have a follow-up?
Sorry, no, I'll lower it.
Okay. So I don't mind putting sort of a sunset on this. I would suggest August, so that we can hold our executive committee meetings virtually over the summer as well. So I'll add the caveat that it's until August, because that would also be a month before we reconvene for full board in September. So is there any objection to that? That we continue virtually until August of 2022? Virtually, regardless of what the public health guidelines and open meeting law updates are. So even if it reverts after April 15th that we need to meet in person, we will still continue to meet virtually because that's what our board has expressed they want to do. Any objections to that? Okay. So was that clear for the record, Jesus?
Yes, crystal clear. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
with that, I waive the rest of my report.
All right. Thank you, Jesus. So we'll now move to next month committee agendas, and we'll begin with discussion of committee meetings, and we'll begin with transportation, but I don't believe Philip is here, correct?
I don't see him. With this thing on share screen, I can't see you guys. So if I don't see him,
I don't see him. So we will move on to the next committee, and we'll follow up with Jean and Philip by email.
Okay.
We'll move on to environment and parks. Kevin? Kevin, you still there?
I am now off mute. Thanks, Kyle. We will know by the end of next week the community organization that will present for 4 minutes, followed by discussion. I'll say that yesterday I met with the point person for a new Friends of Ralph Bunche Park group. This may be the group we hear from next month. I will know in short time and let the district office know. Second, we will continue an item we started in the previous committee meeting, fiscal year 2024 budget. In the meeting, Steve Simon from the Parks Department noted that he and his team are still trying to get some of our fiscal year 2023 projects approved, but we will move forward with that discussion on 2024. Third, we will continue our discussion of the status of the Grand Central Library. As Kyle knows, this week, our Vice Chair, Jeannie D'Onofrio, spoke with the president of the New York Public Library System. That president confirmed that the library is slated for closure this year. He gave multiple reasons. We continue to research data about the community need for the Grand Central branch. We will have our usual update from Parks and Recreation from Sheena Kaufman, the district manager of Parks. And as far as requests for partnerships, we continue to get a handle on any individuals or groups who volunteer to improve parks that don't have conservancies or similar groups. It was actually nice to hear from Alexandra on this topic today regarding Albano Playground. On our community vision, with our community vice chair, we are addressing the possible planning of a community center in the district, and separately, more open and safe public space in the district remains a top priority.
And that concludes your report, Kevin.
And that concludes my report.
Can I ask a question?
Yep, go ahead, Rich.
Any possibility of shoehorning a senior center into the community center? Because that's been one of our budget requests forever.
I'm so glad you asked that, because we should get together on that. That's what, when I mentioned our vice chair, that's what she's pushing for is priority on seniors.
Okay.
So we're looking at different spaces and planning. I know this is a long-term effort. We're in the embryonic stage right now, but we'd love to maybe cross-pollinate with you on this.
Thank you, Kevin.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah, please feel free to have that conversation offline and figure out the best way to move forward on that. Jesus, do you have any questions for the committee?
No questions for the committee. As an aside, as a comment, Kevin, you may want to also loop in LV. There is already a budget request on our budget request list. It's assigned to the health committee, and they were sort of having discussions about whether it should stay or whether it should go. But if there seems to be some actual informed support for it remaining, you may want to attend the next health committee meeting because the budget request will be a continued topic of discussion at that meeting.
That's the same thing that I was bringing up. So this is the same conversation.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. When you said we,
No.
like housing.
Yeah, no apology necessary.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so we'll now move on to the bylaws committee. B, are you there? Did B leave? All right, let's just, we'll move on to the next committee. Go to budget and governmental affairs. Reshma? Okay, yes, Reshma is not on. We'll move next to health and human services. Elvie?
Yeah, hi, good evening. So we had a meeting last March 10 and we discussed 3 items in our budget request. The first one was the senior center, center. And so we're able to, so we tabled voting on this request because we want to get more information about it. The second one was to expand senior programs. And so we need to inquire more from Council Member Rivera's office on how the resources are allocated when it comes to the senior programs. And the third one, the request on promoting vaccination and immunization, we voted to remove from our budget request because the city is active in promoting vaccination and there's nothing else to accomplish. So in our next meeting, next month, we will continue to discuss 2 more items in our budget request. And when it comes to partnerships, so a new item that I proposed is to collaborate with public safety on requesting budget to buy back guns in our district. So we will discuss this also in our next meeting. And I also would like to ask Matt about it, the feasibility of getting a budget for this item. And I have not gotten any response from Matt. And our committee vision is to advocate for seniors in our district and definitely to push on the senior center. That's all.
Great, thank you, Elvie. Matt, could you connect with Elvie offline just to discuss that particular initiative in depth? I'm sure you have a lot of experience on the other side on how that would work or not work. So if you could connect with her. Thank you. I also want to bring up a topic that I've discussed actually with several people about an update about the VA hospitals. I know that this is something that has transpired and been proposed several times over the years about potentially closing the Manhattan location, which is right on, between 25th and 23rd Streets in Manhattan, and then the one in Brooklyn. But they have proposed again, the US Department of Veteran Affairs, closing the hospitals in Manhattan and Brooklyn because the infrastructure is so old, because they believe the population of enrolled veterans is shrinking, and projected decreases in demand for inpatient services. So they recently, earlier today, released recommendations that would cost about $29 billion to modernize its facilities and things of that nature. Mark, I know you've had some experience in this in the past. Could you maybe provide some insight to it? And maybe LV, you might want to add this one way or the other to your agenda for April.
Yes.
Sure. I think it started when I was chair under a former president decided to close a bunch of hospitals, and they were looking at our hospital. Carolyn Maloney, of course, fought back very strongly and got them to not close it by indicating or proving that the hospital was needed, that the beds were required. There were a lot of programs there that couldn't be serviced anywhere else. I think the nearest one that really could meet any needs was in Bay Ridge, Fort Hamilton. So there's a precedent. I think that the same issues pretty much apply, because the comment was that, this is not nice to say, but veterans were dying off because they were older. And it was like, well, yeah, but there are more veterans now that are younger who need these services. Maybe the services really aren't the right ones, or they need to be beefed up, for these servicemen and women, different services. So I just think that we should reach out to, well, I'm sure Carolyn's already on it, but I think we need to work with her office and the other federal electeds and even state and city, because it's a huge, it's asset to our community and the city. And if we lose it, it's really, really a problem. So.
Claude, do you have a follow-up to that?
Yes. Actually, Margarita Lopez really was leading the fight on keeping the Veterans Hospital in place. We did write, if you go back and research, you might find a resolution that Eric Lugo and I wrote that deals with the Veterans Hospital. It's somewhere in our files. One of the things that people do not understand about the Manhattan VA hospital is that it's probably the most central located and the most easily accessed for the veterans in the whole metropolitan area. That includes Connecticut, New Jersey, et cetera, Long Island. It's the easiest one to get to. So when you change that and suggest that veterans in New Jersey go to another veterans hospital, it's more difficult for them to get to the other veterans hospitals. And that was another one of the prime reasons that we used in order to keep it in place.
Perfect, thank you. So LV, let's add this to your April one.
Yeah, I want to ask a question.
Oh yeah, and we'll get in touch with Representative Maloney.
Okay.
Yeah, her office, and then do we, whoever our point of contact is at the hospital itself, maybe we can learn a little bit more about their actual operations on the inside, just to give, hear their perspective as well. And yeah, for, Claude and Mark, if there are any other people or old resolutions we should be looking at, if you could forward that to us, or what we should be looking for, that would be helpful. And Alvi, you wanted to say something about that?
Yeah, so as community board, so to support this, we have to write a resolution.
For the hospital?
A resolution to support non-closure of the hospital.
Yeah, so it'd probably be a resolution, against the closure of the Manhattan VA hospital. Yeah, particularly for the points that Mark was just making, like, which veterans are you talking about? We have Iraq and Afghanistan and people coming back from that and still dealing with issues from that. So it is still a vital resource.
So just to be clear, the topic of discussion is, well, right now, there's an active proposal to close the VA hospital.
Correct. Yeah, the Department of Veteran Affairs, U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs.
A discussion of the proposed closure of Manhattan VA hospital. And Kyle, did you say you had some like reading material or background material on this? Maybe you can send to Elf and also to the office.
Yeah, I already sent it to LV, and Mark sent it to me as well, and I'll forward it to you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's a Cranes List article, so you might not have complete access to it, but
okay.
I'll try and find if there's an alternative.
Oh, we can figure that out. Okay, so now this is now the new agenda.
Yeah, let's actually make that the first agenda item rather than the second.
Okay.
Because budget requests might be a more open-ended conversation, so better to put that at the top. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right, we'll then move on to housing and homelessness.
Yep, thank you. And before we do that, I just want to mention that in the health committee, I told LV that I would talk to Carlina Rivera's office about possible collaboration on senior center, and we should probably have a three-way conversation involving parks. Once you know, I coordinate with parks on it, because it's really sort of one big ask, or potentially one big ask, and it would be nice to know if we can get council support.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of housing, as you see, we meet late in the month. We haven't even had our meeting for March. We have canceled it because we had nothing pressing. In the February meeting, I didn't attend, but the conversation was about tenant protections, which is an evolving issue, and we're going to bring it back in April. We may have had some developments by then. I'm hoping that we will have had some developments, but it's not. It is still in flux. There are a few items in old and new business. One is the state of the relationship with DHS, the transparency resolution. I will want to coordinate with you, Kyle, before I bring that up, but let's let a little time pass and see if we get an answer. There is the idea of DHS using hotels for homeless residents has come back up after some homeless people were attacked in the last week. And I want to keep my eye on that and see if it becomes or remains salient. And if it does, that might be something we need to add to the agenda. And then finally, the state budget resolution conversations have begun, and I have heard rumors of housing related items. I don't know what they are yet, but that is something that we will probably want to bring up in new business. I don't think it needs to be on the agenda unless we become aware of something that is concrete and requires action from us. We'll know that in a week or two. And then finally, Jesus, if you don't mind, can you add budget requests as our number 2 item? I think Elvie was very smart to get going early on that in health, and I would like to copy her good idea.
And I see a question from Claude.
Yes, I would like to ask Richie a point of clarification. I was watching the YouTube of your last meeting, and I believe her name Liliana is from DHS.
Yes.
I heard her state that the safe haven is located at 123 East 15th Street. Can you clarify that? Because I know that's the Seafarers Hotel.
Yeah, it's on the same block as the Seafarers. I don't think it's in the Seafarers, but I missed that meeting.
Well, the only thing I know at 123 is the Seafarers.
Hang on, let
It
me
is,
pull up.
it is the Seafarers
It-
Hotel.
It is.
Okay.
Can you clarify? Are they taking part of that hotel, or are they taking all of the hotel? What's what?
I would need to double check, but because I don't want to, I assume it's the whole thing, but I don't want to speak incorrectly. So I will have to get back to you on that.
I was under the impression that they were taking the whole building that they were taking.
As was I, but
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the Seafarers is closing or being sold or something other. In other words, yeah. Okay.
we'll double check on that just to be clear and get back to you.
Okay. So let's move on to the next committee. We got public safety. Matt, go ahead.
All right. There it is. Okay. So we have one follow-up item from the DA's office from February's meeting that came to light after. So if I want some more details on the Small Business Alliance. So we'll get an update on that. And then we'll have some precinct updates. It's been a good 6 or so months since we've had that. And then Seema and I have been talking about doing something on cybersecurity, which seems especially timely now given all the increased threats. So we're still trying to track down the appropriate speakers on that. We've given Brendan some leads, but low confidence that we'll be able to get those. So we're still working for some others. I would add to this agenda, I think we should probably do budget items as well on here. We're probably only going to have one more meeting after this before the summer. The June meeting would fall after full boards. So it's not usually a good time to have a meeting. So I do want to get started on the budget items here, and then we could certainly, we're certainly on board with the gun buyback. LV, if you're still on, I haven't answered you because I haven't gotten any clarity on what that entails just yet. But as soon as I have something, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
So that's pretty much all I have for right now.
Okay. Are you all set, Jesus?
The only question that I have is that the discussion on cybersecurity, typically when we reach out to speakers, they want to have a very clear idea of what it is we want them to discuss. Reaching out to them to be like, hey, we'd like you to talk about cybersecurity. That's very broad. We probably would not reach out to them until that is sort of made a bit more precise. Are there any plans for when that might be? Should you guys maybe workshop this more in committee, maybe in old business, and then see if there's interest, and then we can, after that, try and find a speaker? Because I worry about reaching out to them and asking them to speak on cybersecurity. They'll ask us like, what aspect?
Yeah, that's a fair point. We'll narrow the conversation a little bit, and we'll let you know in the next couple of days.
Okay.
Okay, so let's move on to the next committee, Land Use and Waterfront. Sandy, go ahead.
So our typical update from the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, excuse me, we are trying to get EDC and DDC together. I'm not sure we'd like to them to, I'm sorry. We'd like them to come to the April meeting, but it's going to be a scheduling issue. The discussion of the area under the FDR Drive by Stuyvesant Cove Park. Again, I think we really need to have the response from Solar One to move forward with that. That's something we just don't know yet what the status is of that. So we can have the discussion. I guess maybe we should invite Stephen Levin or Dina from the Solar One to participate. The discussion of the racial impact studies, it turns out that while we've been trying to get the Public Advocate's Office to attend, the Planning Commission has actually come up with a tool to do this. And we did have they're trying it out currently, and it's going to be available to us shortly, but it'll be on the City Planning Commission timetable. Whenever they're ready to issue it, we can have a review of it. The electric vehicles, Lou is preparing a resolution. I can reach out to him to find out exactly what it is, but he said it was dealing with land use and electric vehicles. I don't know if I can get a more precise description of that. And then, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was never mind. Continue.
And that's okay. I totally understand. And then an update on the work of the community planning fellow. We will continue to do that. And he had a request for people to fill in his form. I think he's been reaching out to various people. The other thing I asked to add to this month's agenda, because it is timely, or it's time sensitive, is the issue of removing the 12 FAR restriction for New York City. And that's something that's part of the state agenda. And we've received correspondence from various people objecting to it. It's Regional Plan Association supports it. Civitas does not support it. And I asked if we could have George Janes give us some feedback on the proposal. It may be a moot point, depending on what happens in the legislature, but I'll try and reach out, I guess, to some of our elected officials, state elected officials, to see what their position is. But it will be decided, I guess, in the April budget, the state budget. Brendan pointed that out, that it wouldn't make sense to discuss it in April. We really need to discuss it in March. And that's it for me.
Okay. Jesus, do you have any questions?
Yes, I'm sorry for interrupting earlier. It sounded, your intonation sounded like you were asking a question. So
it's like an accent. I'm sorry. Sorry.
No, it's a nice accent. Regarding George Janes, we have reached out to him. He has confirmed that he can turn around a memo. It may not be ready though until like maybe 5 days before the committee. So I'll we'll send it to the committee once it's ready. But the turnaround time to read it will be, not like weeks, but a few days. And just to be clear, if I understood correctly, regarding the discussion of the area under the FDR by Stuyvesant Cove Park, we are awaiting some sort of response from Solar One. I'm sorry if I missed.
It was discussed at the full board that Solar One receives funding from the parking under the FDR. So returning that to public space may be a critical issue for Solar One. We want to know more.
Okay, so yes, now I remember, forgive my denseness. Nature of funding for Solar One. Okay. And as far as the racial impact studies, are you reaching out to a public advocate, or would you like us to continue to follow up with them?
Well, we don't need to follow up anymore because they've been superseded by the Planning Commission. So,
okay.
I mean, maybe when the Planning Commission introduces the tool, we could ask the Public Advocate's Office to let us know if it did what they wanted it to. But yeah, I guess I should reach out to them and just say we'll wait for the Planning Commission to address it.
Great, that'd be helpful. So this essentially is contingent upon the public release of the tool. And then if it's not released publicly by the time this April meeting comes around, it'll move over to May.
I'm pretty sure it'll move over to May.
Okay. All right. And as for Lou, if we can get some specificity in the next week or two, that would be great. We'll hold off posting the agenda until then. If we can't, and we have to just go with this, I guess we'll just go with this. But if he's not going to have the resolution ready, we should know, because then we should take this off.
And if he does have it ready for March, we will discuss it as old business.
Okay.
And then we'll take it off completely. And Larry did ask a question. I hope I've answered it. He asked about the seawall repair. And that's really, it's contingent on having EDC and DDC at the same meeting, which we're hoping to do, in April, but I just don't think it's going to happen. The EDC has not been very easy to get to them to attend a meeting.
Could we actually get Larry the ability to speak? Just want to say for Larry, do you have any follow-up or point of clarification on that?
Larry, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Sandy. I wanted to mention that yesterday I was at the ferry dock, and I wanted to alert the board to the fact that I sent a photograph of the condition of the seawall as of yesterday that you could share with Sandy, so that'll be just for your records and for the discussion. It's as we've described it previously, there are holes in it, and that's what's caused some serious undermining. And my comment was that the seawall repairs, if they're not done, and they don't find some supplemental money to do it before they start the serious work in this part of the park, which is still to come, that it'll be undermined and undone in short order, as what happened down at East River Park when I first moved here, and people were falling through the walkway because the pavement collapsed underfoot. And I worry about that being the case here because there is not an intact seawall.
Yes, I think many people have been made aware, Larry, and we'll do what we can to follow up, definitely.
Well, I think we may have had this mentioned in our resolution when we discussed the scoping, and maybe a further resolution might be something that the board would want to take up.
Absolutely, but I think we need to have EDC come. I guess we can say if they don't come to the April meeting that we proceed without their attendance, but we want to try at least let them come and hear directly from us.
Right, and one other thing, this would be a new business discussion of the condition of the ferry landing, which I've discussed in detail in that same email discussion with Brendan yesterday. That might be a topic of discussion because, well, the details are in the email. I don't have to discuss that now.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Larry. I see a hand up from Kevin as well.
Yeah, hi, Sandy. You may want to reach out to Solar One's Sty Cove Park manager. She reached out to me and gave me a tour on Sunday. She's very concerned of that seawall. As you may know, her office is in that trailer that's right there. She said she doesn't know if anybody's listening, but she's scared. So again, I think she would be a good speaker unless somebody else above her from Solar One wants to address it.
I think we have, the CEO is very happy to address it, but it would be great when we do get EDC to come, we will ask her to come as well.
And I took pictures too, which she was, wanted to see if I was going to kick those over. I'll share them with you as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to youth and education. John?
Yeah, hi. In terms of our prior meeting, I reported on our discussion on school food at the full board. So since it's getting late, I won't repeat that. However, I will report that we've had really excellent feedback on the resolution that we passed in full board out of our committee on funding for the 853 schools, both from parents and administrators and also from an assembly member's office. So that's getting some traction, and I think will make a difference. We are going to take up, now that we know, it says venue TBD, I'm going to be telling people it's going to be venue Zoom, because I want to put together a very good panel to discuss the school buses across New York City and the issues with them. It's a very hot issue. It's actually a cold issue in the winter for many families. And I'm going to, now that I can tell them we're going to be on Zoom, I'll reach out to try to have some really, very valuable input, either both from the DOE as well as from advocates. I would like to, since our committee has been particularly negligent in the past in dealing with budget issues, I would like to move the discussion of arts education in Manhattan Community District 6 schools to the next meeting and replace this discussion with a discussion of budget related issues. Whatever wording you use, Jesus, for the other committees, I'm completely happy to have, but this is something we've been fairly bad on. And then we will move the discussion of arts education to the next meeting, because I think the bus discussion will be quite lengthy, and I will reach out to Community Board 5, which wants to partner with us to be part of that discussion. And that's it for now. If there are a couple of hypotheticals for our May meeting, but I'll wait to see how that resolves in Albany.
Okay. Jesus, do you have any questions for John?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, so we'll go to business affairs and licensing. Claire?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's information for April because we don't know what renewals will come up, but I do anticipate that we might still be discussing the open restaurants program at this time, potentially. We're definitely going to continue the discussion in our March agenda, which the meeting is next week. I didn't say this in the attendance, but I invited Anton to join us this meeting because he's been doing a really great job, as we know, leading the charge on the open restaurants program resolution. And I think that he does have a draft of a resolution available, but I think I'll hand it over to Anton at this time. I don't think we have to get into like the details of the resolution, but that's just an ongoing discussion that we're having in collaboration with transportation and land use. So Anton, I'm not sure if there's anything specific you want to add, or if we can just continue the.
I did join the meetings for land use and transportation committee. We did discuss at length some of the parts of the resolution. I did a second resolution and took out a lot of stuff to make it more clear and straightforward as to what we felt the committee should be putting in the resolution. I did finish it this afternoon. I sent it to the board office for review, and we'll probably take a look at it at our next meeting next week. If the board office would be kind enough to send to all the other committee members, I should say committee chairs, I would appreciate that. And if they have any comments, concerns or anything else, I'm very open to making changes. I originally did this resolution based on the one that CB wanted done. That one that they did was about 5 pages long, and it's far too long. I think the basic things we wanted to get across were that we want to have our say about how the new rules and regulations will be promulgated. And the second part is that we want to have a say into whether a restaurant or food establishment should have, or in what circumstances have its application approved or not for the open restaurant program once it's promulgated. One size doesn't fit all, and I think what's good for the Bronx might not be good for Community Board 6, or what's good for Community Board 6 may not be good for Community Board 1. So I think it's very important that we as a committee have our say, a strong say, into this open restaurants program. As you know, we do have a say in the open seating on the sidewalks now, and I think that should be reinvigorated along with the situation of on-road seating. So if anybody has any questions or would make any suggestions, I'm very happy and very open to what you have to say.
Thank you, Anton.
Just a quick question. Have we had any of the restaurant owners participate in the discussion so far?
No, we haven't so far. They have, as I been attending the city's Department of Transportation's, how should I say, webinars on this. There have been restaurant owners who have had their say, as well as other members of the general public and members of various other community boards.
Yeah, let me put you in touch with some of the restaurants in our district, because they were actually pretty critical in the beginning of this, at the beginning of the pandemic. Like the Restaurant Row East Alliance have been really great partners with us, because I think it just would be valuable just to have them part of the conversation, and could actually be partners in some of the sort of like regulations and oversight things that we've implemented in this.
Fine.
Perfect. Yeah, so I'll connect you guys.
Okay.
That sounds great. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And that's all from me, unless Jesus has any questions that I haven't answered. Alexandra.
Just to clarify, Anton, you would like me to send the draft reso that you sent over this afternoon to the executive committee? You were muted, Anton.
Sorry.
You would like me to send the reso to the executives? Still muted. Thumbs up.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Any specific instructions? Just read it, or shop it around to their committees, or just, hey,
I
Anton?
think just for information and to read.
Okay. All right. I'll do that in the next day or so.
All right, I just also have a question for Claire. Did you and Sandy end up talking about the casino stuff?
Not like just us two. But I'll follow up with her and we can talk about it.
Yeah, because if we could get something out on that pretty quickly, because our electeds are waiting on us for that.
Okay, no worries. That was like a change from the last that I heard from you on it. It was like, no, don't say anything. But now I understand that they are asking for something from us. So is that something that you want us to add to our agenda in March?
Yeah, but, I mean, if you want to bring it up initially in March with your committee, because I think the way that the open.
It also was confusing because of with
the other issue.
Them showing up. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I was just kind of leaving it to you two to figure out how you wanted to proceed with it. But I think the way that the open restaurant stuff has been working, there hasn't been a need for like joint meetings or anything, but just presenting to each of the committees. So yeah, if you could connect on that, I think a similar process would work well for
That sounds good. Yeah, I think that our committee is definitely like in consensus and could put something together, and Sandy and I can talk about it.
Okay, so maybe add that to the March for yours, and then have some kind of initial resolution that can then be shared with land use, and then they can have their input. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll tell Alexandra to add that to March, and then we can discuss and continue. Okay.
Oh yeah, Sandy, go ahead.
And I'm just wondering, is the water club going to come back to your next meeting then? Because the resolution was sent back to committee.
They haven't confirmed that they're coming back to our meeting yet. I highly doubt it, but they were invited back again.
Their liquor license has already been approved by the.
Yeah. So that's an issue we're dealing with on the back end, like why the SLA would approve it when we had passed a negative resolution. So we're dealing with.
We actually spoke to the SLA, and long story short, it takes there because of some laws that are on the books. It takes a lot to deny a license renewal. Pretty much, the conception seems to be that like if you just come to the bulk meeting and right as the thing is going to be renewed and you protest enough, it'll be denied. At that point, if there aren't already open investigations, a long history of documented complaints, it's pretty much too late. It will probably get renewed. So I think one thing the board can do, and we can help with this, in our communications, like our newsletters, is to try and encourage the public that if there are problems, to get in touch early and to document, because until an investigation is opened, everything is assumed to be hurtling towards reapproval, and very little can stop it.
Yeah, but that's also very annoying, and maybe we need to follow up. I can write a letter to them, because then it kind of just negates community board review to the point that it's like, okay, well, the only reason you would have to follow it is if there's a major investigation. So then what's the point of a review? But yeah, we can talk about that offline. But Sandy, you had your hand up still? Same question?
I did wonder then about Lagos on 49th Street. Was their license renewed?
No, that one was revoked. When we spoke about water, we called the SLA up. We asked them about Lagos because we had not heard about them in a while. And apparently, yes, that license was revoked. It was, if you recall, Lagos was availing themselves of a license that belonged to, I believe, Marshall Street. That license is the one that was revoked. And we've been monitoring, trying to see if we could see indications of alcohol continuing to be sold. The restaurant, the establishment was not closed down. The obstacles and the barriers legally to doing that are very high. But the SLA had enough evidence to revoke the license. And they do, they can check just to make sure that they're on the up and up still and not selling things they're not supposed to be selling. But that license is revoked.
Can they apply for a new license?
They can, but they will be scrutinized quite closely. And if the community notice any shenanigans or things going on that shouldn't be going on, maybe disturbances or sales of things that shouldn't be being sold, we ask them to contact the community board office at help, HELP, at cbsix.org and let us know right away.
It's been very quiet, extremely quiet.
And I'll just add to that too, that Councilmember Power's office has really been on top of this as well. And so they've actually taken on the sort of like, more punitive actions against them and coordinating with the local police and things like that with that particular establishment. So we've made our stance on it very clear, and now the council member has been taking further action on it. So
they've been good partners on this. Sandy, I'm sorry, whatever you were saying, it got kind of muffled out. What?
I happen to live next door, and it's been extremely quiet.
Oh, okay. It's good.
That's good to hear.
It's good. It's all good. So,
Rich, you have your hand up as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to, not to belabor it, but regarding Water Club, I find it very annoying that we go through a review process that has no impact. And the situation appears to be that, the owners don't care what we think because they assume that they're going to be renewed. Do we have any recourse at all, including in public opinion, or do we just have to take it?
Well, like I said, I can make a noise about it, which I would like to, because I'm not okay with that for that exact reason. So,
excellent.
Yeah. So whether that's a letter directly and in partnership with a council member, whatever that means, we'll explore it and get something done, because I'm on board with you, especially as the former chair of that committee. It really pisses me off. So, and just it sets a bad example and precedent for other applicants and other operators. So I'm on board. Kevin?
Yeah, I'm wondering if the SLA check to make sure they're not just using it for private events, because that was one of the true issues of the committee. And let's face it, there's a sign up there now that says private events, which is hammered, literally nailed on top of one that used to say restaurant. And now it just says private events up front. So,
I mean, even aside from that, it was the point that our full board voted on it to deny it, and it was still passed. So
I'm with you on that. I'm one of those that voted in committee.
So even if we were being ridiculous in some way, that was not communicated to us. There was no conversation, which is inappropriate.
And I fully concur that it sends a message to all those due diligent restaurant owners and managers and attorneys who do a good job and prepare in front of the committee. And for them, if they do get word that someone could back end to the SLA because Buzzy O'Keefe possibly has a connection, and I'm not accusing, I'm saying that's a possibility, it really reeks of something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you for that. All right, seeing no further questions for this, we'll now
Is that something that we should be bringing up in our committee coming up, or is that something that you want to handle as?
I think it's been, I mean, you can mention it during your chair's report in your committee, that we discussed it at exec and I'll be taking further action, but there's no action needed from your committee because you've already gone through the proper process of reviewing it and all that stuff. So you can mention that as part of the conversation, especially if they don't show up again, which probably won't because there's no need to. But you can mention that as part of it. I mean, it can even be part of whether you choose to continue with commenting or to negate it. But yeah, nothing else needed from you. We'll take it from there. Enough.
Okay.
Obviously, you'll be part of that letter as well as the chair.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. So we'll now move on to old or new business. If any committee member has any old or new business, please raise your hand. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be really quick on this. It's about the street co-naming thing and the draft that went around. Just want to clarify really quickly that I didn't write any draft for this resolution yet. We haven't convened our quote unquote task force, which is the point. It's just going to be me and working together. I should note that neither Anne nor I particularly have a horse in the race about any particular restrictions against street co-naming, other than the idea that we want to be part of the process that brings them back. So, but the draft that's going around, I believe, is a copy of a resolution from another board. So the terms and the conditions outlined there are entirely the decisions of people outside of our organization. So we're going to be working on this. Some of those guidelines that they included were good. Some of them I'm scratching my head about, like why is there only consideration twice a year? Why is that codified in guidelines? There is also something structurally wrong with the resolution where the entire set of guidelines in the whereas sections without justification, and then the resolve is just to adopt the guidelines as stated. And that's not really how we want to write a resolution for this. So we'll be working on that. I'm going to talk to Anne in the next couple of days. We'll get some collaboration going, and we'll move from there. If anybody has any feedback on this, please let me know offline. We all gotta hang up on this call.
Yes. Thank you, Brian, and thank you for taking that on. I noted that you're sharing a model from another community board, so I appreciate it. And yes, again, please connect with Brian offline if you have any particular comments or ideas on this, so that we're not delving into committee business and construction of this idea once we're voting on it. So if you have anything to discuss, please connect with him on that. All right. Is there any other old or new business? All right, seeing none, I'll just mention that I will email the rest of the board about the decision we've made tonight about proceeding virtually until August. And I'll share that with our elected representatives as well, so that they're aware of that going forward. But yep, just wanted to thank everybody again for a really productive and meaningful meeting tonight, and for all of your thoughtfulness and research into tonight's topics. And seeing no further business, I'll adjourn the meeting at 8:32 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Good night.